My name is Martin Newman and I'm the Consumer Champion. After 37 years in consumer-facing industries, believe me, I have seen it all. My goal is to play a role in providing consumers with a voice, to connect with brands that they've engaged with, and to help companies to learn from their customers where they're going right or where they're going wrong. You're joining me on Customer-Centricity, the podcast. Each episode, you will find me in conversation with leading business people, discussing some of the key issues around how to empower positive change for consumers and brands. Before I introduce our guest for this episode, let me tell you a little bit more about customer service action. Just like you, I've been on the wrong end of some staggeringly bad customer service. We've all experienced it, haven't we? Whether it's the rude waiter or having to wait 40 minutes in a queue. And just like you again, I've also been delighted by an amazing experience when I wasn't expecting it. But aside from telling the manager or writing a rather awkward thank you note on TripAdvisor, what can you really do when something is great or when it's not so good? My frustration has always been not knowing how to raise these issues with the brand in question in the first place, or whether in fact I'd be even wasting my time by doing so. For these reasons, I launched Customer Service Action, a platform where people can share their good and their bad customer service stories and experiences in one impartial place. My vision is that we can collectively make a difference and create the change that consumers seek, and in turn help businesses too. Good customer service and good customer experience leads to successful brands. So please visit us at www.customerserviceaction.com to learn more. Thank you for listening to Customer Centricity, and now for our guest. Hello, my name is Martin Newman and welcome to my podcast, Customer Centricity. I am the Consumer Champion. I am a constant advocate for improving levels of customer service and customer experience. After all, it pays to do that. As the name of the podcast will suggest, it's all about putting the customer at the heart of all you do. To this end, today I am hugely privileged to be joined by the co-founder and the co-CEO of an amazing business called Afterpay. In the UK, it is known as ClearPay. I'm joined by Nick Molnar, who is, as I say, the co-founder of the business, and they are the leading buy now, pay later provider. Nick, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
And I think I'm eating into your evening because Nick is joining us all the way from, is it sunny Sydney?
Yeah, it's supposed to be sunny summer in Sydney. Today was raining, but no, it's no problem at all to be doing it at night. Love it.
Well, thank you very much. We're very grateful to have you on. Nick, as I've already alluded to, you've created, I think, one of the most incredible businesses that really is changing the way that consumers pay for goods online and in store, albeit not in store in the UK, but to come in the future. Can you tell us how it all started? What was the inspiration for the business?
Yeah, it's quite a long story, but kind of a coming together of many fortunate moments in mine and my co-founder's life. The first being that we happened to be neighbors. So his wife convinced him to buy the house across the road from my parents. My parents decided to be jewelers for my entire life, and I was fortunate to sell the most jewelry online out of my bedroom at university. And one day, Anthony, my neighbor, approached me. He said, "I don't mean to pry, but I see your light on every night. What do you do?" And he didn't exactly think I was selling jewelry. Going to the post office with a sack of parcels with my mother kind of gave away that I was doing something, that was all fair and good. But we got to know each other really well, and got speaking. Following 2008 financial crisis, I had noticed this shift in millennials spending their money, and it wasn't really showing up in anyone's economic data because millennials simply weren't earning enough disposable income for it to be a real trend. But it was clear that there was a preference for debit cards over credit cards. So the thought of how do you build a product that is deeply aligned with the consumer. And if you think about the credit industry, if 100% of people pay back a credit card on time, the industry simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. And so incentives are completely misaligned. So to build a product that, flip the economics on its head, charging the retailer a small fee, but in return, this millennial and Gen Z consumer engages with their brand in a hugely accretive way. That was a really fortunate position to be in. And, that little coming together of, growing up during the 2008 financial crisis, selling jewelry online, and my co-founder's background in finance, really brought it all together.
And it's an incredible story. And I love the fact that, it's born out of, you were selling online, that's, I think I get that. That gives you an edge, I guess. It's that understanding, of consumer behavior from your own experience of being an online retailer. And I think I'm right in saying that, these days, Afterpay has something like 15 or 20% of all online transactions in Australia. Is that right?
Yep, correct.
Amazing. And obviously a significant and increasing percentage in the UK and also in the States as well. You've got a relatively young family. How on earth do you juggle everything? Because you've got an incredibly fast-growing business. I know that you're looking after different markets around the world. I think you've got hands-on responsibility for the growth of the business in the States, as well as everything else that you do, and your young family. How do you do it? How do you juggle?
It's hard. It's a very supportive family is point number one. Yeah. But when you unlock a once in a lifetime opportunity like this, and, we were flying under the radar for as long as we could. And, now it's about how do we scale fast? Obviously you need to have your priorities right, but you can achieve that balance with the right team around you. It's as simple as that. But how you go from 20 people to 1,000 people in, 5 years, and distill that culture of customer centricity and being good human beings and doing the right thing as you scale in multiple different markets, in different channels, in different verticals, it's complex. So, it comes back to the right talent. We've got some of the best people in the world working for us, and we're incredibly lucky. And, there's never a good time for anything in my mind. So, why not do it all at the same time, Martin?
You got to go for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, but a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old,
That's hard yards.
That's entrepreneurship.
My kids are at a different stage. My daughters are now nearly 25 and 20. And we had that kind of 4.5-year gap or so between them, actually, which kind of worked out quite well. So I know some people like to do it, condense it, which you've clearly done. So good luck.
No patience
on all of that. Are you one of these entrepreneurs that only needs 4 hours sleep a night, Nick?
No, even, now being in Australia, we were chatting a little bit earlier, and came back to Australia thinking it would be for 4 or 6 weeks. And I've been here for almost a year. Waking up and starting work at 4:30, 5 a.m. to keep East Coast, West Coast time and have a good overlap with the East Coast. But if you get the right balance, I actually need sleep. Something my mother taught me, unfortunately.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. So no, I just think in my mind, you've always got these different points of equilibrium as you're going, and I know when I'm pushed it too hard, and you know me, and I push it pretty hard, but there's just that balance of how you get it right, and then how the team has the clarity of thought, and sometimes just going that little bit slower, but having that clarity of mind and getting the right balance just amplifies and sends you forward in a faster pace.
Indeed. I'm like-minded, and I don't know if it was passed down from my parents or not, but I certainly need my sleep. And I mean, I'm an entrepreneur as well, but if I don't get 6 or 7 hours a night, I don't think I'm the man that I could be, basically. So I definitely need it. I'm very privileged you and I met, I think, for the first time probably about 4 or 5 years ago in Australia, and then eventually you gave me the opportunity, and Anthony gave me the opportunity to join the advisory board, which I've absolutely loved, and feel very privileged to have had that opportunity. It's always struck me that, you touched on culture there, you touched on people, and you touched on doing the right thing, being good human beings and everything. it's always struck me that, the business has a great culture and has great people and a very engaged team. What have you done to achieve that, do you think?
Look, I think a lot of it comes from the initial set of people that we brought in the first 15 individuals into the organization. And it's amazing how you get this compounding effect of people in the business who, it becomes a privilege to work with certain people. You go to work and you think, wow, how am I so lucky to work with all of these people? And then that becomes a self-fulfilling, prophecy of how it rolls out as you bring more people into the business. Being really clear on what we stand for, what we are, and what we're not. Building things in multiple regions from Australia is deeply unique. There are Australian businesses don't go global. It's not a thing.
It's not a thing, is it?
And so there's a lot of new learning. There's a lot of career development. There's a lot of first-time opportunities at Afterpay. And, to get the diversity then of culture across many parts of the world. And we started in Australia, then we went to New Zealand, then we launched in the US, then the UK, then Canada, and soon Southern Europe. There's a deep set of diverse thought process, cultures, different regions in different phases of business. And it's exciting and it's special. And you don't get many opportunities like this in your life. And so, from our side, it's just making sure you get people. We talk a lot about being grounded in reality. Afterpay's happened pretty quick. We raised our first round of money 5 years ago. We then went public 9 months later. And now we have a market cap of, circa $35-40 billion. And we do $2 billion a month, growing at 100% year on year. And we still feel like we're on knife's edge. Like you still feel like, you're at day one and it's fragile. And how do you keep driving? But, we're just lucky that that's how we can, play through and surround ourselves with those people.
Yeah. Well, I think that's because I was going to ask you about how you keep your colleagues engaged, over the long term. But I guess, some of those opportunities that you alluded to, the fast growth of the business, the fact that we're going into other markets provides opportunities if people want it, I guess, to move.
Yeah.
Quite a few people have moved from Australia to the UK and to the States, and vice versa, haven't they? So
exactly. Lots of global travel. A lot of people want to move to Australia, live in Australia too. So it's about, how do you attract the right talent to the business at the different points in time of the region, and planting early stage individuals in early stage countries, and then they take personal responsibility to waving the flag of culture. It's amazing how that amplifies.
Yeah. So the core audience that you're aiming at is largely Gen Z and Millennials, and the business is packed full of Gen Z and Millennials. I think you still fall within the Millennial bracket, I think, don't you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which is, I guess, obviously one of the core factors of the foundation of the business and how it all came about in the first place. I love the energy. I mean, I had the privilege of presenting at an event that you ran in Australia, going back to December 2019, when we were still allowed to travel. That's the last big long haul journey I've made. I guess I managed a week in the Algarve with my wife in August. How I long for those days of going to Australia 3 or 4 times a year. But honestly, I think, I do keynotes all over the world, and I have never felt how I felt when I came out on stage that day and did my keynote. I mean, the vibe I got back, the energy I got back from all the colleagues that were in the room was just phenomenal. Is that because it's a Gen Z and millennial driven business? Is that what it's
about? We definitely, our company reflects our customer base, without a doubt. We've got, we're just really lucky from that perspective with our, core staff member being a millennial individual. I think also a lot of that stems from the fact that I was given a lot of opportunity when I didn't necessarily deserve it or have the track record to prove that I was capable of it. So having that mindset of, putting the right people who have those skills in with the chance to deliver, I like to think that we stand for that in our culture. But it's exciting. The world has woken up to the fact that, buy now, pay later, which, we think is a terrible term because it's very broad and wide and captures a bunch of stuff that isn't necessarily like what we do. I mean, if the world pays in full, it's a better place than revolving credit.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of education that's required because people naturally try to compare you with what has previously existed. But when they stop and realize that you charge the retailer a fee, not the consumer, you can't revolve in debt because, your account's disabled the moment you go late on one payment. It's small value, it's low outstanding balances, all those things then align with people that believe in what you're doing. I mean, most of our staff members use debit cards, not credit cards. 2 out of 3 people in the UK, Australia, the US, aged 18 to 30 don't use a credit card anymore. They all use debit cards.
Yeah.
So, there's a difference in generational understanding of how different cohorts spend their money. And that's the education process and, privileged position that we're in.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of talks to what I was going to ask you next, because, I'm hugely passionate about customer centricity. Not only is that the name of the podcast, but it's kind of really everything I do is aligned with that. And, the business in the UK, which I said earlier is called ClearPay, I do see it genuinely being a very consumer-centric proposition because, in my mind, when I think about customer centricity from a consumer point of view, it's all about empowerment. It's all about enabling customers to engage the way they want to engage. And isn't that just what we're doing here? I mean, that's ultimately at the heart of what ClearPay and Afterpay are about. How do you ensure it stays that way? How do you ensure the business continues to have that real kind of consumer-focused mindset?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the core principles as an example that we stood by was never charging interest.
Yeah.
And how are you very transparent and upfront with the rules of the platform, and the biggest reason why people pay us back is because they want to keep using the platform again. Someone that buys with us in year 1 buys 4 times a year, but 3 years later they buy 24 times a year. Yeah. And you can only buy 24 times a year when your account isn't late. Yeah. And so the checks and balances that exist within the product are really important because they're all in the customer's favor to prevent themselves because incentives are completely aligned. Yeah. If 100% of people pay us back on time, we would make more money. If 100% of people pay back a credit card on time, the industry doesn't work. Yeah. And so it's about setting the framework for the organization who understands your true north. Our mission is to power an economy in which everyone wins. There are too many experiences in life where it's not truly a win-win, and that's the opportunity because then it's not deeply consumer-centric.
Yeah, I get that. And I suppose, again, Gen Z, we talked a lot about them being really at the heart of both the customer base as well as, the colleagues within ClearPay and Afterpay. They really are the change makers, aren't they? They're going to change the world. I mean, I've got 2 of them at home, one on the cusp who's about to turn 25, so she's the very sort of start of Gen Z, and then my 20-year-old who is a sort of Greta Thunberg Mark II. What do you think? She really is a deep activist across kind of everything, What do you think their impact is going to be on the world? Because I think it's going to be really quite profound.
Yeah, well, there's 2 things that are happening at the moment. One is what they believe in and what they stand for is very pronounced and public and real time. There's a lot of real time feedback, but whether it's in fashion and beauty, whether it's sustainability, diversity and inclusion, gender fluidity, being at the forefront of all of those trends and actually demanding brands that stand for principles that are aligned with how they live and supporting brands. When we saw COVID start to unfold, the small business cohort weathered it significantly better than the big business cohort. So you had consumers saying, I'm going to support brands I love at times of at difficult times and of good times. And it was driven by the Gen Z and millennial cohort. But what's happened is millennials and Gen Z seem to, have been thought about as like the next generation, the up and coming generation. The average millennial is now in their mid-30s. In 10 years' time, millennial and Gen Z will represent 50% of all retail spend in the economy.
Right.
And they'll earn, a very material portion of disposable income. So there's this compounding growth over time as millennial and Gen Z consumers earn more income, and then their trends become the trend. And that's where I think there's a freight train coming for many brands who have built really big businesses focusing on a different cohort, but income earned and disposable income are linked. And they're coming into their perfect point of purchasing power. And trends are going to dramatically change because, the firm beliefs of different generations are distinctly different.
And I think that, I think what's interesting about what you were saying there as well is, I mean, if you're a business, even if today, for example, I mean, I can't think of too many businesses where Gen Z and millennials wouldn't be relevant as a customer base. But even if you thought today they're not my cohort, they are tomorrow. And to your point, in 10 years' time, they're gonna control, 50% of the revenue and expenditure. Therefore, having a true sort of customer-centric view of customers and building customer lifetime value, how you build that relationship is massively important. And I would have thought that, again, this is where, ClearPay and Afterpay really come into their own, because they are natural drivers of loyalty. If at the end of the day, they drive the engagement on the platform with the different brands, then, they play that kind of loyalty role, don't they, to some extent?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's a group on Facebook in Australia called We Love Afterpay. It's got hundreds of thousands of members. More than 1% of the Australian population is part of the Afterpay fan groups, where, the most used word in our App Store review is the word love.
Yeah.
And so to see, ClearPay and Afterpay brands resonate because of what we stand for, the biggest reason why people don't use us is because they think that there's a catch. And when they realize there is no catch, they recommend us to their friends, and word of mouth is tremendously strong, to the point where they actually start their shopping journey with us. So, in the month of November, we sent over 35 million leads to our retail partners. It's almost, 400 million leads per annum.
Yeah.
We're sending about as much traffic as the big social media platforms are to our retail partners. And when you can become a marketing channel with an incredibly high intent consumer whose disposable income is growing, and they're the customer that everyone's striving to acquire, you're in a really special position, because it's no longer just a payment product. This is about being a marketing channel for our retailers and, standing for something that is the opposite of credit. And it's created a movement of consumers that have, backed the change.
I think what you've just described is what I would probably say is the difference between having customers and having fans. You've got fans, you've got brand advocates, you've got devotees, and that obviously drives that word of mouth, which every marketer is looking for. So well done. But at the end of the day, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? Unless, one, you had a proposition that really resonated, and two, you live by what you say, you walk the talk. Everything you're describing about the business and how you see the world and your colleagues and everything, it all adds up. It's the sum of the parts that ultimately drives that type of consumer engagement. I think it's 100%. Just a quick question about the city, and obviously you're a listed business, because you kind of fall into what I would imagine is that term fintech, financial technology, but I see you as customer tech or consumer tech. Again, I mentioned earlier about consumer empowerment, because I think that's really at the heart of it. Is that at the heart and the essence of what ClearPay is doing in the UK, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Look, from our perspective, it's how do you provide customers with a great budgeting tool where they, can make their transactions, have the right, ways of managing their cash flow and buying with, largely their debit cards. 90% of our customers use a debit card, not a credit card. And so, how you build a product that, is the opposite of finance because you flip the model around. The definition is challenging because there's so many new products that are coming up around. And, at the end of the day, the key lens, I think, to scale and product market fit is, to your point, customer centricity. And so we're building this ecosystem of consumers that are incredibly valuable, that retailers and other brands, desire to build a great relationship with. And it's up, at the end of the day, if you build trust, that's your catalyst to more.
Totally.
And so our consumers say, we trust you. And then the question is, how much of their lives can we play a special role in? And if we can build win-win equations in different moments of their lives, like that's our focus.
Yeah. And just a nice segue on from that, actually, because you obviously must capture a huge amount of really interesting data, or as you call it down under, data, about consumers and their behavior. And I know from my sort of previous experience as an e-com, a multi-channel director of brands like Burberry and Harrods and Ted Baker, how much I would have killed to have the type of insight that tells me who buys what on a Sunday, and what day of the week do people buy suits versus dresses versus shirts versus ties, and just the ability that would give you from a marketing point of view to be able to talk and communicate, engage with consumers more effectively. What do you do with all of that, and how can you leverage that both to help, I guess, consumers and customers of the business who are using Afterpay and ClearPay?
Yeah, I mean, look, generally within the first 24 hours of launching with a brand will represent 10 to 30% of their online transactions. So, to very quickly capture a significant share and not only be able to communicate, deep demographic data and insight of that customer who's shopping at their brand, but, what does their share of wallet look like, and where else are they shopping, and where does their intent sit? Who are their true competitors for that share of wallet?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we partner with our retailers incredibly closely to provide them with the insights that they need to lead their businesses. When a certain customer's buying online, when a certain customer's buying in store, what does that omni-channel consumer truly look like? And that's the position that we're in, because you can function in both channels. But yes, there's in Australia, we process 1 in 3 online fashion transactions. And, we're in a really lucky position to partner with our consumers and our merchants just to, build better experiences.
Yeah. Just in terms of sector, I mean, I can see how this obviously works incredibly well within retail. Have you got any plans to go elsewhere? Can you take this into travel, into leisure, into other verticals?
Yeah, I mean, 3 years ago in Australia, fashion and beauty represented north of 70% of our total volume. Today, it represents 40%.
Right.
You can Afterpay an airline ticket. In Australia, you can go to the dentist and use Afterpay.
Oh, really?
So where this goes and how our consumers can manage their cash flow across all verticals that they love, that's the critical focus for us. And so, that for us is key. But the consumers take us there because customers actually go out to their favorite brands and say to them, "Hey, we'd love it if you got Afterpay." And then brands come inbound to us, and we're naturally expanding into a variety of new verticals. Whether it's homewares with House, or going into sporting goods with brands like Gymshark, etc. There's a variety of ways where you can slowly over time move into categories that millennial and Gen Z consumers love. But at the end of the day, I don't think there should be a limitation to how we provide this flexibility to our consumers across all verticals.
I agree. And, at the end of the day, if it's about consumer empowerment, and if that's how they want to buy, if that's how they want to procure goods and services, then why not? And I suppose as you continue to add more and more categories, again, that just makes customers more sticky. It makes them more loyal. Yeah. And from the brand perspective, it drives even more leads and more lifetime value.
100%.
You started in Australia, then you went to the States, I think, first of all, and then you came.
Don't forget New Zealand.
Oh, well, my apologies to the All Blacks and everybody else down under. So You went Australia, New Zealand, then you came to then you
US and UK.
Then you came to the UK. Where next? I know you got plans for Europe. What's on the horizon?
Yeah, we launched into Canada, and we announced an acquisition in Southern Europe with a brand Pagantis that was live in Spain, Italy, France. So a glide path to Southern Europe in the short term. And for us, it's just about going global with our existing retailers. Our retailers are the ones pushing us to expand into new markets. They've seen the local offerings in those markets and work with us in different regions. And their ask is, how do you move wider as quickly as possible? And they'd love to be the launch partner because they know the positive impact that has. So to have the support of those retailers who, will be there from the start and can scale with us, that's just a lucky piece of the strategy where you can be retail led in your expansion.
Yeah, and I've noticed as well now that fairly recently, I think you've opened up the website so that consumers can buy from all of your customers in Australia or America or the UK or whatever.
Exactly, so completely open cross-border ecosystem is absolutely critical, and opening up tens of millions of US consumers to shop from UK brands, it's a core part of our value proposition.
Yeah. Nick, you like me, you started as a retailer and you became a service provider. How does that feel? What do you prefer?
Yeah.
or is it you like a bit of both? I don't know.
No. I think in my DNA, I'm definitely a retailer, but I think you get a different level of appreciation when you start on the retail side of the fence and you trade every single day, and that's your DNA. To then when you get into the B2B side of the fence, we treat our B2B business very much like a consumer business. At the end of the day, the biggest unlock is consumers loving you. Consumers love you, the rest takes care of itself. So it's been quite a pleasure. I mean, you get the diversity of retail thought when you're dealing with so many great partners. Get to have the most incredible conversations. But we love what we do. We love retail, and that's the secret sauce, I think.
It is indeed. Yeah. Likewise, I mean, I've been a service provider pretty much half of my career and a retailer for the other half, and I do still think of myself as a retailer at heart, for sure. You are undoubtedly one of the most driven people I've ever met, and I'm not blowing smoke. You really are. And I just wondered, do you genuinely, do you think you'll ever get bored of the journey, or where I suppose that's a slightly rhetorical question to some extent.
Oh, look, firstly, thank you. I think it's a huge compliment. But look, when you can function with a really long-term view because you want this to be your last job, you can, really make long-term investments in systemic change and play a critical role and make decisions that are probably different to others can. And, I'm loving every minute of it. It's such a once in a lifetime opportunity. So, for me, you just keep peeling the layers of the onion back and it all gets more and more exciting.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, there's still so much to go after in terms of markets and customers and everything. Despite the success, I guess there's a huge amount of headroom in the future.
Yeah. And that all comes with its appropriate complexity, but that's the fun part. How do you solve more complex problems and distill it into really clear to understand strategies so your team can get behind it and understand the direction, and retailers and consumers buy into it equally. I mean, it's such a privileged problem to solve.
Yeah. Well, if I were a betting man, which I may occasionally do, I certainly wouldn't bet against you achieving all that and more. Nick, I'm very grateful for you spending time with me just now. I know it's not the weather in Sydney today for a barbie, but I dare say you're going to want to go and put your kids to bed and have a nice relaxing evening with your wife. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me.
I'm very grateful. If you would like to know more about what we're doing at Customer Service Action, the platform where people can share their good and bad customer service stories and experiences in one impartial place, then please visit customerserviceaction.com. Please remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can be notified when we go live with future episodes. Thank you so much for joining us today on Customer Centricity with me, Martin Newman.